Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Hope you guys are having a great day so far. So in this video, we'll be building a beach modern villa within The Sims 4. And I started off by building this within Tartosa because I honestly feel like it's one of my favorite worlds when it comes to The Sims 4 because I just really love how vibrant it is. The lighting always looks really nice and I just really love how it's sort of like on this island and it just feels really tropical and it just feels like a place where I would really want to be in real life right now. So yeah, I just feel like it's like a great location to build these like more modern looking sort of like beachy villas and stuff. And for this home in particular, we're going for a more Mediterranean style, sort of more like on that end because it just has that very nice sort of like bright orange roof detailing on it, and I just feel like it fits that sort of theme a lot more. And we started off by placing this sort of like fencing around this like curved piece on the outer area of the lot itself, and I just create like a very nice sort of like interesting looking oval swimming pool in the center of like where that area is, and that's sort of just like the small sort of like lower end of the garden area. So we have a lot of these like platforms going on throughout this entire home, which I feel like made the home look a lot more interesting overall. And I feel like once you place like a lot of platforms around like a small build, it just makes it look a bit more dynamic and interesting, especially since we are actually utilizing the tallest wall height for this build. And I just wanted to make as much of the space as possible because we are working with a 30 by 20 lot, so there wasn't really much to work with, unfortunately, so I just had to make do with what I had. And you would see how it sort of like comes together really nicely in my opinion, and I just feel like it turned out super cozy and it's just like a really nice and interesting looking villa in my opinion. And I was actually inspired to build this based off of a 3D AI visualization that I had seen on Pinterest, and I just really loved how it looked. And especially since we are nearing towards that summer season, I feel like it was kind of necessary to sort of just like introduce some new unique looking builds on the channel. Previous few builds that we've been building relatively on the channel have been quite similar, not in the sense that like they're the exact same home, but just like similar in style, if that makes sense. So building something off of like where the seaside is and the beach and stuff, I feel like that is just like a nice little change, and I feel like I hope you guys would also appreciate and enjoy this build and change as well. But yeah, so right now you can pretty much like get a general idea and view of like what the shape of the home looks like. I feel like it looked really interesting from the back side of the home, and the front of the home equally looks as interesting in my opinion. It just takes a bit more time to develop because I was trying to focus on trying to make that back garden area look as interesting as possible. And I was sort of like envisioning like a florist sort of just like staying in this home because we just have so many plants going across this entire home. There's like, it's just like super busy, and it just has like a lot of these like plants and like a bunch of variations as well, and a lot of trees as well that look and feel really tropical. And I just really love that vibe and feel in my opinion, especially when it comes to building within this environment where we have so much of those exact same like plants and trees in Tartosa. It just works super nicely with like sort of like blending in with the environment. And I did actually use a bit of the tool mod to actually place some plants and trees from the outside of where the lot is, just to make it feel a bit more lively and vibrant. But it shouldn't really like have an impact on your games if you guys do plan on downloading and playing with this build in particular. But right now, as you guys can see, I'm just placing that very nice bright orange roofing that we have. Unfortunately, we didn't really have a lot of different variations of this like sort of same roof texture and like color in the game, so this was sort of just like the best one that I had to go with, unfortunately. And I do believe this is the one from the base game, so you shouldn't have any problems if you guys do plan on downloading and playing within this build. But we have this like very unique sort of section of the home on the right hand side if you're looking at it from the back garden area, where we have these like archways on the outer areas of it, and it just made it look really interesting. And I just added some very grand looking columns on either side of each of the arches once we progress onto that. But yeah, that was just, I was just mentioning that in case you guys were wondering why I left so many different like columns and stuff like that without adding anything onto it. I was eventually gonna add some walls there as well as like adding some arches there on top of it as well. But yeah, right now I'm just focusing on trying to get the outer shape and the roofing done so that I can just like move on to actually adding the smaller details that I knew were kind of necessary to make this build come alive, I guess. And this was like the main part of the build, which is like this like very detailed sort of platforming that we have at the back garden of the home. Although we don't really have a lot of platforming going on inside of the home, I feel like it still is quite important to incorporate that for the exterior. And even though we are actually using the tallest wall height, when you actually play within the game or like within the build itself in the interior, it looks more or less as if you were on the first or the second wall height, because we use such tall platforms to the point where it just doesn't feel like it's the tallest wall height, which in my opinion is kind of good because it doesn't really leave a lot of like negative space on the walls once you're playing within the interior, in my opinion. But yeah, I just feel like it turned out really nicely overall, and it was kind of like a smart choice to go with that overall as well. And I was also thinking of like placing that second sort of like second story on a medium wall height as well, but it just was looking a bit too tall, and we didn't really have doors and windows that I had selected already in like a taller wall height, so unfortunately it would have looked a little bit too weird. So instead I just ended up keeping it on the shortest wall height, which I hope you guys don't really mind. I feel like it's kind of just like the general size that everyone usually goes for on their like second, third, fourth walls and stories, so I feel like you guys wouldn't really mind it too much. But for the overall fencing and the balcony areas, I didn't really decorate or add too much detailing to them, mainly because they were so small to the point where I feel like they weren't going to be really that functional. So I didn't really want to bother adding some functional object pieces there when it wasn't really going to be actually be utilized, if that makes sense. And as you guys can see, I'm trying to place a fence on this side of the balcony area, but because there is that specific roofing piece, I wasn't able to add a fencing on that side of the balcony, which was kind of annoying, but instead I just went with these half walls and it worked out perfectly fine. But even if it wasn't the exact style and design that I was trying to go for, it still sort of worked out in the end, and as if it was like trying to act as if it was like a real support, if that makes sense. And as you guys can see, I already added the cats and dogs arches on either side of the sort of walls where I wanted those very nice detailed curves, as well as adding those really nice modern marble columns, which I feel like look really elegant, which I feel like worked really nicely with the style that I was trying to go for. And I also utilized some of the new doors and windows which came from businesses and hobbies, such as this one in particular. I used it on the part where the slanted roof was. I feel like it looked really nice and it actually fit the style that I was trying to go for, especially since it came in this darker brown swatch for the actual detailing inside of the door itself. So you might actually notice that a common pattern for most of the build is we have a lot of these like brown framed windows, which is very nice, and it's just like a nice change from the default sort of like black and white frames that I have going across all of my other previous builds. So it was kind of like a nice change to incorporate some different color within the windows itself for like the exterior of the home, rather than always keeping to those neutral colors, if that makes sense. I mean, even though brown is kind of like a neutral color, it still is, this one's sort of just like a darker one, so it just like sort of makes it look a bit more interesting and it stands out in my opinion. And yeah, so I just tried to experiment with a few different windows and stuff and different options that I had from the game to sort of like make this vision come alive. And I was trying to find windows that had those shutters in particular, and you might actually notice that throughout the build as well, I also added some ones that were like standalone shutters on top of like windows that didn't have it. And I just feel like that just gave it that extra detail that it sort of needed, because I didn't really want to have a lot of like these plain white walls. Even though they look really nice and aesthetic and simple and clear, I still wanted them to have a bit of detail incorporated within them. So yeah, I just added some shutters where I felt like was kind of necessary or needed to. And I did also utilize some French doors on certain parts of the balconies, and some of the balconies I also used some like plain white sliding doors as well. And I actually really liked that mixture. And I feel like even though these like houses in real life typically come in a more sort of like traditional sort of furniture and detailing and stuff like that, I kind of went for like a more mixed approach. So we have a lot of traditional as well as a modern approach and detailing and design going across this entire home. So you'll see both elements of those designs and styles, if that makes sense. So I feel like the sliding door sort of matches the modern aesthetic a little bit more, and the French door sort of just like match that traditional sort of style a little bit more, in my opinion. But you guys can let me know what you guys think about that in the comment sections below. I'd love to know your thoughts and suggestions. But yeah, I also really loved how we had this half wall going across like certain elements of the back garden area, especially at different varying heights. I feel like that also made the home look a bit more interesting as well, because despite we're actually working on a relatively small lot, the shaping and the extra small little details really do add quite a lot to it. Usually when you build a lot of these like smaller homes within the Sims 4, they look really basic because you don't really have a lot of shapes going on and stuff like that. And I feel like this build didn't really have that much going on either. Like it just had a few little pockets that like poked out from the main structure of the home. But I feel like the overall details that we have going across, such as like those different varying wall heights and like the platform levels and stuff, really made a huge difference to this small build, in my opinion, which I feel like is what took up the most time when creating this as well anyway. But yeah, speaking of things that took a lot of time, placing all of these small little green bushes and plants and stuff genuinely took a lot more time than I really anticipated, because I really wanted to make it feel very lively, and I just incorporated a bunch of different plant variations and a lot of flowers, pretty much like every single flower in the game that has like different variations of the same plant of it, if that makes sense. So yeah, I just scattered a bunch of different ones that I felt like felt really like summery, or just like felt really tropical, and it just like incorporated it throughout this entire home. And once again, as I mentioned earlier, I am utilizing the tool mod to place some objects outside of the 20 by 30 lot, because I feel like the lot restriction is genuinely one of the main problems when it comes to like creating these like more detailed builds. I feel like I wish they give us the entire rectangular area perimeter that we had for this specific lot, because as you guys can see, like it's pretty much like outlined. We might as well just be allowed to add some additional details in the world itself, so that we can create some more unique looking builds like this as well, in my opinion. But I feel like either way, as long as we were able to get away from it by utilizing mods, I don't really mind it too much. But yeah, I also utilize a lot of different like potted plants and like small cypress trees, just like sized down, as well as like a lot of different planted trees as well that I sized down quite a bit, just to make it feel a bit more like fitted in, if that makes sense. I tried to make it feel very lively, and just like try to incorporate different colored ones to make it not feel like it's all like the same green looking like green shrubs and bushes and stuff. So yeah, just like trying to add a lot of these like nice potted plants that look well taken care of, as well as adding a lot of these trees that looked very tropical and just like resembled all these like very nice simple small palm trees, if that makes sense. And I didn't really neglect any part of the home in particular. I tried to add as much detail to all of the sides just to make it feel as even as possible, because I feel like it wouldn't really make sense if you added so much to one corner and then left the other corners out, if that made sense. But especially since we were right next to where the pathway was towards the front of the home, I didn't really mind adding too much over there, because it was already like quite busy over there anyway. So yeah, I just kind of like focused on creating that negative space around the entire home itself to be feeling a bit more busy, if that makes sense. And of course I went around with the terrain paint as well to ensure that each of the sort of like grassy area was sort of just like incorporated a bit of dirt as well, just to make it feel a bit more realistic as well. And I did actually end up removing some of the plants, bushes and shrubs and stuff that I placed around the build as well, because I feel like it looked a bit too busy at the point where I just feel like I really had to get rid of a few stuff just to make it feel like it was a bit breathable, if that makes sense. So yeah, and then I also went around the entire home as well and just like added some outdoor lighting and some small extra details as well that I feel like was kind of necessary to add onto the walls as well. And yeah, I feel like that was pretty much it when it came to pretty much like doing all of the exterior. I was really happy with how it was going, and we do also have that very nice sort of like outdoor patio area that is sort of just like enclosed in, if that makes sense, on the right hand side of the build where we have those arches, which I feel like is like a nice touch for a build like this, which incorporates that indoor outdoor living experience, if that makes sense. And of course I did also incorporate the very nice simple bin and the mirror box at the front of the home as well, to ensure that it is completely functional. And yeah, just like pretty much was very happy with at this stage with how the home was looking, and I just ended up moving on to adding the furnishings to this build. So we started off by adding these very nice sun lounges to the back garden area of the home, as well as like a nice simple umbrella, as well as adding some very nice simple seating under this umbrella, just to act as if it was like a nice simple like sitting area to like lounge and shade in as you're like sitting and eating, if you were to cook at the barbecue area, which we have right off to the side of where this sort of like nice sort of small seating area is. And I just feel like it looked like a very nice and simple cozy area, in my opinion, because I just feel like it looked really nice and it fit the space really well, because there wasn't really a lot to work with anyway. It just felt like it was like really cozy, in my opinion. And yeah, I just really loved how it turned out. And I of course utilized one of my favorite bins, which is the one that came from the event, which I believe pretty much every single person has by now. So yeah, it's just like a really nice touch to be able to utilize something really modern and simple like that. And it also fit this color scheme that we were trying to go for throughout this entire build as well, which added to that simple nice brown color that we had going across the entire home. And at first I really wanted to add some nice simple seating towards the front of where the pool area was, but then I ended up just deciding to go with some nice simple sun lounges, because I feel like they kind of fit really nicely. Initially I wanted to place like those simple sort of like single armchairs, because I thought it wouldn't really like fit, or the Sims wouldn't be able to move around it. But I feel like these would be plenty of space for the Sims to still be able to like interact and like move around the entire pool area, if that makes sense. And yeah, I just feel like I just added some small sort of like additional details, such as like the stairs railings, as well as like some additional plants around the entire home as well, that I felt like was kind of necessary and made sense. And just like trying to add to the realism and just like these small little details that I feel like are really noticeable when it comes to creating these like more smaller builds and lots, if that makes sense. But yeah, this is sort of like the outdoor indoor sort of like patio area, which is sort of just like enclosed but still has access to the back garden area, if that makes sense. and I just went with like this very nice dark wooden theme to it, and I just feel like it looked really nice and cozy. The main color scheme throughout this entire home has this very nice like dark brownish color. We do incorporate a bunch of like different colors as well, but that was sort of just like the main goal and theme, because I was looking at some like different inspiration for the interior on Pinterest based on like these Mediterranean homes and stuff like that, and a lot of them did incorporate a lot of these dark brown colors for the furniture pieces themselves. So I kind of wanted to sort of replicate something like that within the Sims 4 as well. And I just really love how these small pockets that are like on the outside of the home turned out, because they do actually feel really cozy and really realistic. In terms of how realistic it's going to be when it comes to like gameplay and functionality, I'm not really that sure, but in terms of how it looks visually and how I was trying to get the house across to you guys, I feel like it kind of made sense to decorate it and just like do it as it looked, in my opinion. So yeah, I just feel like it turned out really nice and cozy. But yeah, I feel like there's not really like a main point to actually sitting out here or doing something, if that makes sense. So I mean, you guys can definitely add some functionality. I did try to add a small simple sort of tablet so your Sims can like draw or use it as like a nice simple art like sort of sanctuary area. But these small outdoor areas felt like more of like a plant sanctuary area rather than anything else, in my opinion. But yeah, moving on into the interior of the home now, we're starting off by just like picking between different counters that I feel like will kind of be necessary for this kitchen area itself. And I decided to go with these ones, which I feel like looked really nice. And since it had those extra details on it, I feel like it really didn't look that minimalistic in my opinion. So I feel like it kind of made sense to utilize it within this build, because I feel like I really loved going for those like more simple and minimal looking detailed like objects and stuff. But for this building, in this case, I kind of went for a more maximalist looking furniture piece, if that makes sense. So yeah, I just tried to add as much detail as I could without having to over clutter it, if that makes sense, because we do actually have a lot of objects on the exterior of the home. So I didn't want to add too much to the point where it was going to make the entire game lag, especially since we're on a 30 by 20 lot. It could get a little bit laggy in my opinion. But yeah, I feel like it turned out really nicely overall, and I was sort of just like trying to juggle how much I was able to clutter the entire home, if that makes sense. So I feel like there's like a nice variation of both of those elements incorporated, if that makes sense. So yeah, I feel like we have this very nice sort of like area for the kitchen, which is like in a rectangular area, which is like divided by these wooden beams that we have going across the ceiling, which I feel like looked really nice and interesting. And I also decided to incorporate shelving as well as a wall sort of cabinetry pieces, so we sort of just like use both of them within the same kitchen at the same time. I don't know how realistic or functional that would be, but I feel like it kind of looked really interesting and sort of just like added to the vibe that I was trying to go for. And I also wanted to incorporate this very nice simple accent wall, which had this very nice matching light beige color that we had going across the kitchen cabinet counters themselves as well, which I feel like looked really nice overall. And of course I also incorporated a nice simple small little coffee section off to the side of the kitchen area. And we do also have the lounge area right next to where this kitchen area is, so it's a relatively open floor plan. Despite it being like more focused on a traditional build, I didn't really want to enclose it in a lot of different rooms and stuff. I wanted to have it, make it feel a bit more like open space and stuff like that, which is the main reason why I mentioned earlier that we have a mixture of a modern and traditional sort of design blended within this build overall. And I just feel like it looked really nice overall, which is like that nice simple mixture. And I also was kind of like puzzled with what I wanted to do with the island counters themselves as well, because I wanted to incorporate some additional different like functionality, such as like adding the bar stools onto the bar counters, but I also didn't want to take up too much space in case it wasn't really like functional at all. And the initial design that I had was sort of like this L-shaped sort of like island counter design, but it just wasn't really working out with having the living space right next to where this kitchen area was. So instead I just resorted to doing one simple line for the island counter, which I didn't really mind it in the end, and I feel like it looked really nice overall. And for the living space itself as well, I just went with this nice simple color scheme for it as well, just like utilizing some nice bright oranges, some nice dark browns, as well as like a nice sort of like chestnut color, and just like trying to make it feel a bit cohesive in my opinion. And I feel like it turned out really nicely overall, especially with the incorporation of that fireplace, which I feel like looked a lot more cozy, and yeah, it just makes it feel a bit more traditional as well in my opinion. And for the front area of the home, I just added some small little pieces, nothing too special, just like a nice simple burglar alarm, as well as like the thermostat, which came from Seasons, just so it's like quickly functionable, because I feel like in a real life home you'll probably have a thermostat really close to where the front of the home is. So that was sort of like the main idea of that as to why I placed it right next to the front area of the home, if that makes sense. And yeah, just like try to add some like small little details across the home as well. So I wanted to incorporate a very nice sort of like nice and simple dining table area towards the backside of where this sort of living space was. And I feel like it worked out really nicely because it felt really cozy, because it was just like right where all of the windows were, and it was just like designated within its own space, but it wasn't really like closed off because there's not really that many walls within like the main seating area of this home, which I feel like looked really nice overall. And once again, we're going for that more dark brown color scheme as well. And in case you guys are wondering how I'm able to just like get so quickly done, I did actually end up skipping a few stuff as I'm like selecting objects and stuff. So unfortunately, it's not as quick and easy to place all of the seating and the tables down. I did actually experiment with some of the stuff as I was like recording, but I just sort of like skipped them just so you guys don't see that boring process, because I feel like it can get a bit tedious, especially when it comes to picking certain furniture pieces out, especially when I'm not really used to building and creating with a lot of traditional objects. I feel like I focus more on these like more modern and minimalistic looking pieces. So yeah, when it comes to like creating a more traditional design and like trying to make things look a bit more cohesive, it takes a bit more time to just like sort of pick specific stuff that I feel like would work a lot more nicely together, if that makes sense. So yeah, I feel like it turned out really nicely overall, considering I don't really build in this style a lot. But then again, we do actually have quite a lot of stuff that I feel like look really traditional within the Sims 4, so I didn't really mind it in the end anyway. And I really loved how this plant plot looked. I just feel like it looked super nice, and I just really loved placing that one right there. And we do actually have a lot of plants throughout this entire home. Like we have a lot of like these like hanging ones, some that are just like assigned on walls, but we do also have a lot just like based in like plant plots as well, and it just looks really nice. And those ones that sort of just like remind me of those elephant ear plants just like looked really nice, and it just worked perfectly with it being right next to where the dining table area was, especially since it was like right across those very huge glass windows, if that makes sense. And I also went around the entire home as well, just like adding some additional sort of pendant lightings just like throughout this entire home, just like trying to distinguish them between each of the areas of the home, just like trying to give unique different like sort of like hanging lights for each section of the home, if that makes sense. And this is actually one of the primary bathrooms that we have on the first floor, so it's relatively spacious, and we're actually going for a really unique design and details within this bathroom itself. So I'm kind of just like utilizing some specific objects that I feel like you would probably see within a villa like this. So since we are going for this more Mediterranean theme, I didn't want to keep it to like a very nice modern minimalistic sort of like black and white sort of like grayish tiles everywhere. I wanted to really stick to the theme and go with like the specific sort of like textured flooring and the walls and stuff. I know the walls are relatively like more modern, but I feel like it kind of makes sense because I feel like how traditional can you go with tiles, you know? But I sort of just like picked this like sort of sandstone color, which I feel like worked really nicely with the basin that we have as well as the bathtub itself. And I feel like it just turned out like a very nice and simple bathroom as well. And I also, of course, added a plant in there as well, just to keep within the theme of the entire home, if that makes sense. And yeah, just like adding a lot of different plants and stuff throughout the entire home, which I feel like made it look and feel really busy than it really was. And I just really love how it turned out overall. And we do also have something very unique on this side of the room, which is actually a sort of like open and like sort of like bar area, which is sort of common, but we do also incorporate a sort of office space within this open area as well, which I feel like is kind of like a unique take. Usually I prefer sort of like creating my offices within a room itself. I feel like it would be a very nice change to sort of incorporate an office sort of like out in the open, if that makes sense. Even though it is sort of just like divided in its own area and space, it was sort of like still out in the open because it didn't really have any sort of like doors or like any walls that were sort of like covering it, if that makes sense. But I feel like it turned out really nice overall, and it's something that I'll probably be introducing within my new builds as well. But I feel like I really had no other choice to do anything else within this like open space, because it was relatively huge and I didn't really want to leave it empty or just like add some unnecessary seating. So I feel like it kind of made sense. The best thing to do would probably just to be like to incorporate something that was functional. So in that case, I feel like, okay, we'll just add a nice simple office area, which I really didn't mind at all, which is also doubled as a sort of like small simple bar area, which I feel like turned out really nice. And I did also incorporate some nice simple curtains across the entire home as well. And I did also make sure to pick out specific stuff that I actually felt like worked and fit the overall environment and vibe of the home itself as well. So yeah, we do actually incorporate some more modern looking curtains in certain areas of the home, but it mainly focused on that more traditional design, if that makes sense. But yeah, I just feel like it turned out really nicely overall with the different curtains and the different variations that we have going across the entire home. I feel like it just makes it feel a bit more realistic as well, in my opinion. And yeah, I just feel like it looks really nice. And of course, I also changed certain colors of the curtains to make it match the rest of the home and the environment as well. But yeah, moving on from the other side of where the office area is, we sort of have this very nice, small, simple bedroom area on the first floor, which I feel like kind of had a unique design and shape to it, because it sort of had these platforms going down leading towards the bed area of the sort of like bedroom, which I feel like made it look really interesting. And I feel like it was kind of a great idea to sort of incorporate a bedroom on the first floor to make it feel a bit more luxurious, as if it was like some sort of guest bedroom. If you guys have the Growing Together expansion pack, if you wanted to invite your grandparents out and stuff like that, they can like stay on the first floor or something like that, if that makes sense. That was sort of just like the main goal and idea behind it, as I was just like creating this bedroom on the first floor, which I feel like turned out really nice and simple. But yeah, so before I actually placed the bedroom, I did actually want to compare it to different beds within the game, just to like sort of get a specific design and idea across, if that makes sense. I really wanted something that looked really traditional rather than sticking to that more modern theme, and I did actually try to steer away from more of the modern objects as I was building the bedrooms, because I didn't want them to feel really modern and stuff like that. I wanted them to sort of like have that traditional vibe that I was trying to go for, even though we do have certain elements that might be resembling that more modern touch to the bedrooms. I feel like it did overall look a little bit more traditional, in my opinion. So I did actually decide to go with the Dream Home Decorator modular pieces for the sort of like dresser area, but I feel like for the beds and like the actual like side table, as well as like the additional clutter that you have going across the bedrooms itself, they do feel and resemble a bit more of that traditional design. But you guys can let me know what you guys think about that in the comment sections below. But I feel like I tried to focus on incorporating some stuff that I feel like felt a bit more traditional, in my opinion, and just like trying to add some like small sort of simple details, as if it was like a grandparent's home, or if you were to like stay here and just like invite your grandparents over. But yeah, moving on into the second floor now, that is actually the second bedroom that we're actually starting off to decorate. And as I mentioned earlier, we're still sticking to that traditional theme. I feel like these beds do resemble that sort of theme, especially since they look really detailed in comparison to the ones which came from the Dream Home Decorator expansion pack, in comparison to the ones that came from the Dream Home Decorator game pack. But I feel like those ones are just like really simple, and they don't really incorporate a lot of these like small details and textures, whereas these ones do. And I feel like these ones fit the vibe that I was trying to go for a lot more. And once again, we're also focusing on just like incorporating some objects that have those really harsh like wood tones, which I feel like are really prominent within these like more traditional looking homes. And this is actually a desk that I haven't really ever used ever when I built in The Sims, so it was kind of just like a nice difference and change for me as well, just like build them in different ways, if that makes sense, rather than utilizing the same objects and furniture pieces like that all the time. And yeah, as you guys can see, I literally just like stirred away from utilizing the Dream Home Decorator modular pieces, because I wanted to utilize something that looked a bit more traditional looking, and I feel like this one definitely did, as well as like adding some small simple like plant details across the entire home as well. And it also incorporate a lot of different accent walls throughout most of the rooms and bedrooms themselves as well, because I feel like it is quite common to see like a lot of like wallpaper detailing and textures across a lot of these like more traditional homes, in my opinion. But yeah, moving on into the sort of like master or main bedroom for this home, I wanted to keep it on the second floor, and they sort of have access to the two balcony areas for the back garden area of the home. But as I mentioned earlier, there's not really a lot of space within the balcony areas themselves as well to make them functional, so it's not really that much to worry about. But if you guys really wanted to incorporate some additional sort of functional objects within those balconies themselves, I'll probably like add an easel or like something that they can sit down on if you guys wanted to. But I feel like it kind of made sense to just like keep it empty, because we do actually have an easel and some additional functional objects within the build itself. So yeah, I just like tried to create a nice simple master bedroom for these people who are going to be planning to live here and stuff like that. So we actually went with the Dream Home Decorator bed, and although it doesn't look really modern, it sort of just like doesn't really look that traditional either. I feel like it's like a mixture of those two styles, because it incorporates like very nice sort of like nice detailing, but it also looks very nice and sleek, so it sort of like fits both of the themes. And I did actually go for the wall sconces which came from the Growing Together expansion pack, which is honestly my favorite when it comes to creating a modern or traditional build regardless, because I just really love how nice and simple those sconces look. They just look really nice and realistic, and it just fits any type of style that you're trying to go for. And for this bedroom in particular, I did actually go for a bit more of a modern theme, so I did actually just like make it feel a bit more up to date in comparison to the rest of the home, but I feel like it doesn't really take away from the original sort of like design and style that I was trying to go for. But yeah, for the bathroom area, they do actually have their own ensuite, and I believe this is the only bedroom that does actually have their own ensuite, because there wasn't really a lot of space to work with within the build anyway. So yeah, this is like the main sort of like luxurious looking ensuite that we have. And I did actually go and stick with the same sort of like default like dark brown color scheme throughout this entire bathroom as well. As you guys can see, the tiles on the floor as well look very sort of like outdated and a bit more traditional, and I feel like you wouldn't really see that in a more modern build in my opinion. And I feel like it looked really nice overall as well. And I just like tried to keep it a bit more of like that same mixed theme of like being traditional and modern as well. But yeah, I feel like it turned out really nicely overall, especially with those very traditional looking mirrors as well, which I feel like sort of like blends in and matches really well with the super modern bathtub that we have sort of like in the center of the room, which sort of like cuts the pathway towards the balcony area, but I didn't really mind it too much because it wasn't really going to be that functional anyway. But yeah, moving on into the final bedroom that we actually have on the 3rd floor, which is a nursery. So my vision was just to create it as if it was like a general sort of like default nursery area, and eventually if you guys wanted to actually play in it, you guys can obviously change it into a different bedroom, whether it's for like an adult or a teenager. But overall, I wanted something that sort of like resembled a nice simple like family home, so you could incorporate a nursery within here. And I just feel like this nursery turned out really nicely overall, because it just incorporates pretty much everything that you will probably need for a functional nursery. And I did actually go with the modular dresser pieces for the nursery area itself as well, because I feel like it kind of makes sense to have the hanging clothes within there, and I feel like a full-on like standalone dresser wouldn't really look that realistic within a nursery, so I feel like that looked a bit nicer overall in my opinion. And I did also utilize this very nice simple rocking chair from the Growing Together expansion pack as well, along with the sort of like changing table as well. And the nursery crib itself came from the Storybook nursery kit, which I feel like is just like one of my favorite nurseries when it comes to creating these like nice simple rooms. And yeah, I just feel like it turned out really nicely overall. And of course, we also changed the wallpaper for the walls as well for this room, just to make it feel a bit more distinguished and unique. And this bedroom does also have its own sort of like balcony area as well, but it doesn't really act that functional either. But yeah, so that was pretty much it for all of the rooms that we have in this modern beach house villa. And once we pretty much finished with this room, we just moved on to the main sort of like hallway area, just to like add some additional details and sort of like furniture pieces, just to make it feel a bit more busy and cluttered as well. But yeah, that seems to be pretty much it for this entire speed build. Let me know what you guys think by leaving a like and subscribing, and comment down below your thoughts and suggestions about this build. I'd love to know your thoughts. And I do also have a bunch more videos like this on the channel if you guys are interested in builds like these. But thank you so much again for watching, and I'll see you guys in my next video.